Emily never imagined her marriage would end in silence. She and Daniel had built a life together, one that seemed strong, until she made a mistake that shattered everything. It started subtly, as most affairs do. Liam was a friend, someone familiar, someone who understood her in ways she thought Daniel no longer did. A few stolen glances turned into long conversations, then lingering touches. Before she fully realized what was happening, she had crossed the line. That night was supposed to be like any other. Daniel was working late, and Liam was over, offering her company that felt intoxicatingly dangerous. They didn't hear the door open. They didn't see Daniel standing there, watching. By the time Emily noticed him, it was too late. He didn't shout. He didn't demand explanations. He didn't even look at Liam. He just turned and walked out. At first, she expected an explosion of rage. A fight. A confrontation. Anything but silence. But Daniel didn't come back that night. Or the next. His belongings were gone, his phone disconnected. He vanished, leaving Emily in a house that now felt like a tomb. Liam tried to comfort her at first, saying Daniel would come around, that it wasn't her fault. But his words rang hollow. The thrill they had once shared turned bitter. Without the secrecy, without the danger, there was nothing left between them. He stopped answering her calls after a few weeks. Eventually, she saw him with someone else. Maybe it was always just a game to him. Emily fell into a cycle of regret, rewriting the past in her head. If she hadn't let loneliness consume her. If she had noticed Daniel's distance sooner. If she had fought harder for their marriage before it was too late. But the questions had no answers, only echoes of a life she could no longer claim. Months passed, then a year. She forced herself to move on, but the silence never left her. The absence of closure haunted her more than the betrayal itself. Daniel had erased her like she had never existed, and that hurt more than any words could. She spent 2 years carrying that pain, believing she was the only one at fault, believing she had destroyed something pure. It wasn't until she saw a familiar face in an unexpected place that she realized the truth had been far more complicated than she ever knew. 2 years had passed, but the weight of Daniel's absence never truly left Emily. She had learned to function, to move through life as if she had healed. But late at night, when everything was quiet, she still felt the void he left behind. She had spent countless nights wondering where he was, if he had found happiness, if he ever thought about her the way she thought about him. Then, one evening, while scrolling mindlessly through social media, her breath caught in her throat. A picture. Daniel. He looked different, happier, more at peace. But it wasn't just him that made her heart stop. It was the woman beside him. She recognized her, not as a stranger, but as someone she had seen before. A memory, buried under layers of guilt and pain, surfaced. Sophia. That was her name. Emily had met her once, long ago, at a gathering Daniel had insisted they attend. She had been beautiful, poised, and just distant enough for Emily not to think much of her at the time. But something nagged at her. It wasn't just the party. There was another memory, one that sent a chill down her spine. The hotel. She had seen Sophia at the hotel where she used to meet Liam. The realization hit her like a slap. The puzzle pieces began to rearrange themselves into a picture she had never considered. Daniel hadn't just moved on. He had already been involved with Sophia before he walked out. While Emily had been sneaking around with Liam, Daniel had been sneaking around with Liam's wife. The irony was sickening. She had spent 2 years drowning in guilt, believing she was the sole reason her marriage crumbled. But Daniel had betrayed her first. He had played the same game, with different rules. He had walked away, punishing her for something he was equally guilty of. Her stomach churned at the thought. How long had it been going on? Had he known about her and Liam before that night? Had he left not because of heartbreak, but because he had already found his escape? She stared at the screen, fingers trembling, as anger replaced the sadness she had carried for so long. She had wasted years mourning a love that was already broken before she shattered it. She had hated herself, believing she had ruined everything. But the truth was, they had both been unfaithful. Daniel hadn't left in silence because he was too hurt to speak. He had left because he had somewhere else to go. Emily couldn't ignore it. She needed answers, not for closure, but to strip away the illusion she had lived under for so long. She tracked Daniel down, not caring if he refused to see her. When he finally stood in front of her, there was no anger, no regret, just indifference. That hurt more than anything. She asked the question that had haunted her for 2 years. Why did you leave without a word? Daniel sighed, as if the answer wasn't worth saying out loud. But then he gave it to her anyway. He had already been involved with Sophia before that night. He had known about her and Liam long before he caught them. He just didn't care enough to fight. Their marriage had been dying for months, and when he saw her with Liam, it was the confirmation he needed. Walking away was easy because, in his mind, she had saved him from making the decision himself. Emily felt sick. All the nights she had spent blaming herself, all the guilt she had carried, meaningless. He had been playing the same game, just with a different strategy. Then Sophia appeared, standing beside him like she had won. Emily almost laughed at the absurdity of it. They had all been tangled in the same web, hurting each other in ways none of them fully understood. Before she could process it, another voice cut through the tension. Liam. He had been watching, waiting. His expression was unreadable as he stepped forward, but his words shattered everything. He had known about Daniel and Sophia. Long before Emily ever fell into his arms, Daniel had already betrayed her. And Liam? He had let it happen. He had pursued Emily not out of love, but out of revenge. The final piece clicked into place. None of them were innocent. They had all been liars, cheaters, cowards. The realization didn't bring pain anymore, just exhaustion. Emily didn't beg for explanations. She didn't care anymore. The past was a mess that couldn't be undone, and standing in front of them now, she felt nothing. No love, no anger, no longing, just the quiet understanding that it was over. She turned without another word, walking away from the people who had once meant everything to her. The weight she had carried for years lifted. The past was theirs to hold on to if they wanted. She was done.